Hello everyone, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on there. I've done it so many times and it's just worked, and suddenly everything looks completely different, and it's not working. I hope people can see and hear me okay. Somebody's watching, good. If someone can let me know if the sound's all right as well, because I've obviously had to use a slightly different setup. Anyway, I'll crack on. It might not be such a good sound and video quality as normal, but hopefully it will do the job. I suppose you're not watching for the sound quality and the view anyway, isn't it? It's just me ranting away. Oh yeah, it looks like it's working, good. Right, so questions. Day 11 in the AM. My heart is settling down. Just inquiring as to the science between the heart rate increasing whilst drinking and once stopping. How long before one's body goes back to normal? Just wonder if it's anxiety or just my body ridding itself of alcohol. So this is a really good question. I really like this one because heart rate is one I don't think we talk about enough. And it's such a massive impact on our quality of life. So if we go back to the normal physiology, of course, what happens when you drink alcohol is your brain becomes hyperactive to work under the sedating effects of the alcohol. So when the alcohol wears off, you're kind of over anxious. Now, one of the things that does, it's like drinking too much coffee or taking like an amphetamine or something, but not one that makes you feel good, one that makes you feel really anxious. And of course, it speeds your heart rate up. And you know those ridiculous, irritating memes that you get? You know, like you get a picture of a human body in a glass of wine or something, and it's like all the health benefits of wine. You know, it makes you slur, it makes your eyes glaze and all this. And one of the things I saw on one of them is it increases your heart rate. Like that's something good. So the basic physiology is when you drink alcohol, your heart speeds up because as your body's pumping cortisol and stress hormones in to counter the sedating effects of the alcohol, that puts your heart rate up. So what people normally find is when they're drinking, their heart rate goes up. And of course, when the alcohol wears off, the sedative wears off, it goes through the roof. So that's one of the reasons when you wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning, riddled with anxiety and misery, your heart's beating really, really fast. Okay, so that's the science behind it. But what is, I think, the most important thing, well, it's twofold. Firstly, how that makes you feel, okay, because when your heart goes faster, your body tells you to sit down and rest. And the faster it goes, the more you want to sit down and rest. Okay, and that's why exercise is hard work, because as your heart speeds up, your body's saying, stop, sit down. Okay, so that's one of the basic immediate acts of drinking, is it robs you of energy, it makes you want to sit down and rest. It destroys your energy, and that impacts into the following day. And you do get these people who say, oh, you know, like I'm very fit anyway, alcohol doesn't affect me. They're idiots, it does affect them. Okay, it can't not affect them unless they are not a carbon-based life form, they're not a human being. What they're actually saying is, I don't notice that it affects me, i.e. I drink so much, I just don't know the difference between a drinking day and a non-drinking day. Anyone normal, a normal human being, finds it incredibly hard to exercise either when they're drinking or the day after they've been drinking. Okay, and that's because the heart rate's sped up. Now, everyone has a maximum heart rate, and I can't remember what it is. It's like a certain number, like 200 or something plus your age, or 180 plus your age. I forget what it is, but what you need to bear in mind is you have a maximum heart rate. Okay, so my resting heart rate now, according to my Fitbit when I'm asleep, goes down to kind of like 42 or so. So it goes quite low. Okay, so if you think about that, if my maximum heart rate is, I don't know, say 200, I've got like 160 points to go of heart rate. So I can do quite a lot of exercise. Now, if your heart's already accelerated, you can do less. You immediately feel lethargic and you can do a lot less. So that's the here and now. The other point it does when it accelerates... Sorry, I'm just worrying in case that means people can't hear me or something. So I'll carry on. Can everyone hear me okay there? If someone can message and let me know how it's going. I'm not sure. Can still hear. Okay, well that's good. Yeah, okay. So people often associate drinking with, oh, thank you, Dawn, you're okay, good, right. People often associate drinking, and one of the bad points about drinking is obviously they think about liver disease. Liver disease is a huge killer, but it's not the biggest killer with alcohol. The biggest killer with alcohol is cardiovascular, it's heart attacks, okay? Now, to delve a bit more into fitness generally, if you think about the difference between someone who is fit and someone who is not fit, interestingly, one of the big differences is blood composition, okay? So your muscles, when they work, they need oxygen and nutrients to function. And the harder they're working, the more oxygen they need. And the oxygen's carried to the muscles by the red blood cells, okay? So it's in your blood. So as the muscles are working harder, the heart pumps faster to get the blood cells moving quicker, to get the oxygen to the muscles so that they can work. Now, if you do that regularly, your blood composition changes, and it changes in two ways. Firstly, the age of the blood cells drops because the younger blood cells can carry more oxygen, okay, so they're replaced earlier. And secondly, the blood cells cling together much closer, so there's a greater concentration of blood cells in each cubic centimetre of blood or whatever it is. So every time your heart beats, more blood cells with more oxygen are getting to your muscles. Okay, so that's what happens when you get fit. If you're regularly increasing your heart rate by using physical activity, your blood composition is changing, your muscles are getting stronger, your heart's getting stronger, and you become fitter. Okay, if you increase your heart rate with no associated physical activity, for example by drinking, the reverse happens, because your heart's speeding up, but your muscles aren't working, so they don't need it. So what's happening is there's too much oxygen going around, there's a surplus. So the opposite happens. What happens is the age of the blood cells over time starts to get older and older, so they carry less and less oxygen, and the blood cells start to disperse, so they're less concentrated. Okay, and that's why people then have heart problems. Drinking alcohol is the opposite of getting fit. It actually erodes your fitness. Okay, and that just doesn't mean you're going to die of a crushing heart attack in your late 40s, early 50s. It also means you spend the intervening period very lethargic and exhausted. So it's a really good point, that, because for me, that's one of the big things. Having energy is one of the great benefits of not drinking. And that's why, you know, these idiots who sit there and say, oh, it's really enjoyable and all the rest of it. Well, it isn't at all, is it? Because feeling exhausted and tired all the time isn't particularly enjoyable. So what happens when you stop drinking, your heart rate will go back to normal, and that happens fairly quickly. But obviously, if you've been drinking quite regularly, you're unfit from the drinking, and that takes time to then get back to normal. And then that's different for everyone. It depends how fit you were to begin with, and it depends if you're doing any exercise as well. And it's also why, you know, a lot of people say, you know, I get drunk and I go for a run or whatever, and it's like, well, you might do, but it's really bad for you because it's just putting additional pressure on your heart all the time. And then, of course, that's what happens. You become so increasingly unfit that you stand up one day in your late 40s and you have a heart attack because your heart just can't cope with things. Next question. Can you possibly touch on how important it is to use your alcohol-free muscle in social events, please, to see and reaffirm your decision to live alcohol-free? I definitely do believe the more you use it, the stronger it will grow. I know you tell it straight. Now lockdown is easing especially. So, I think that's a good point, because I think a lot of the time with socialising, it's, in fact, a lot of things we do without alcohol, it's the thought and not the reality that scares us. So when we think about going out and not drinking, we kind of have this image that we'll go out and, you know, the whole room will go quiet and everyone will look at us when we order a soft drink. It's rarely like that. And we often think it's going to be really unbearable, but of course it isn't. And like all these things, the more you do them, the better you get at them and the less you fear them. Humans generally fear the unknown, and we build up the unknown to be worse than it is, which is kind of a natural reaction and fairly healthy, because, you know, for cavemen, if they hear a growling sound in the jungle, if you assume it's nothing to worry about and go blundering in, they're probably the ones that would have got eaten. whereas the ones that were terrified and run away are the ones that continued and evolved into human beings, modern day human beings. So it's natural for humans with the unknown to expect it to be as worse as possible and to fear it. So the way to counter that is to stop it being the unknown, to just keep doing it. I don't particularly like socialising, I never have done, but I find, you know, like for example, Christmas comes along and there's all these drink parties and all the rest of it you get dragged out to. And the first one's always the worst, and then after that you kind of resign to them. I won't say I enjoy them, but I kind of put up with them and suffer them, which is why I've enjoyed lockdown so much. It's been the best Christmas ever. I just sit at home in front of the TV for Christmas. Hello William Porter, could you talk about relapses? I relapsed after 5 months and have started alcohol-free journey again. Prior to this happening, I was sworn off alcohol, but that changed in a moment. No excuses, no reasons. So I'm back at the start listening to your books and reading posts. What really happens around this time in sobriety? I've read posts where people do relapse around 5 to 6 months. Can you give me further advice to prevent me lapsing again? Thank you. So, I mean, there's a few dynamics here. One is fading effect bias, obviously, which is whereby human beings look back on past events more positively than when they actually experience them. And this is a universal human trait. It's not just in Western society. Every human being the world over has this tendency to look back on past events, seeing them really positively. No one really knows why we have this. It's kind of assumed it just helps humans keep a positive outlook on their lives generally, because we look back on the past and think how great we were and how wonderful things were. So it's fine up to an extent, but when it comes to drug addiction, of course, the problem is we start to look back on our drinking and we forget the reality. We forget the waking up in the middle of the night. We forget the feeling tired and lethargic and being grumpy and emotionally unstable and anxious and all the rest of it. And we start having this ridiculous idea of, you know, having a drink out on the beach during a holiday, or, you know, something that we probably experienced all of 3 times in our entire lives and only really enjoyed it because we were stinking hungover to begin with in the first place. But of course, the other issue there is with relapses is when you stop drinking, a few things happen. Your brain chemistry goes back to normal. Okay, and you may be confident, you may not be confident, you know, you may be resilient, you may not be resilient, but whatever you are, alcohol makes you less resilient and less confident. So you might not be a confident person anyway, but when you're drinking, you're going to be even less confident when the alcohol wears off. So the alcohol makes us feel like we can't deal with things. It stops us sleeping, it makes us feel lethargic, and all in all, life is pretty miserable. Okay, and not just when you're not drinking, even when you're drinking. And this is why I don't really like that phrase, drinking is borrowing happiness from tomorrow. I mean, you've only got to look at some of the posts in the group from people who are drinking, who are just miserable of sin. You know, they're depressed and they're drunk, and it's not enjoyable when they're doing it. But we have this idea that, oh yeah, I'll get drunk, I'll enjoy it while I'm doing it, but you don't. That's the stupid thing with it. The first 1 or 2 might be pleasurable as you anaesthetise all the tiredness and anxiety that were caused by the previous drinks, but that's the sum benefit of it. So what happens when we stop drinking? Our brain chemistry goes back to normal. We start to feel really confident. We sleep better. We wake up. We've got more energy. Our heart's not thudding out of our chest every minute, so we get more energy. Just everything improves. But unfortunately with humans, we get used to things. So I've said this a few times, but most people, hopefully, are clothed watching this. Now, if you stop for a minute and think about your clothes, you can feel them against you, but you're not consciously aware of them all day long when you're wearing clothes, because when something is there all the time, it ceases to register on your conscious mind. So the problem is, when you quit drinking, life is massively better, but we start to take it for granted. And that's why they've said here 5 or 6 months, but it can be anything really, because as soon as you start to feel better, you feel great, you suddenly think, what on earth was I doing all these years? This is so much better. And that's the pink cloud. But the reason the pink cloud never really disappears. All that happens is we start taking it for granted. So on the one hand, we've got all these massive benefits, but we just start to think of them as normal. And on the other hand, things like fading effect bias is kicking in. and we start to get suckered into all these nonsensical images that you get on social media, especially at the moment, lockdown's lifting, the weather's becoming nice here in the UK, constantly seeing people posting pictures of drinking outside, and you get sucked into this nonsensical image of thinking, oh, that looks really nice. You know, people don't generally post pictures of them lying there terrified at 3 a.m, questioning their very existence. But they'll be happily posting the positive side of things. And this is what we do on social media. We post the positives and not the negatives. You know, I was saying before, there's some lovely pictures. I've got beautiful pictures of me and my family on Christmas Day. What I don't post are the videos of us bickering for the entire 23 hours, 59 minutes of Christmas Day, which is the reality of it. So that's it. So the advice is very simple, and it's to stick with the reality. See it for what it is. It is a fairly pathetic drug in terms of, you know, there are drugs out there that you take that make you feel really euphoric. Alcohol is not one of them. People will often say it releases endorphins. It doesn't release endorphins. It's a sedative. Okay, we drink in situations where we're likely to get endorphins released anyway, like when we're relaxing at the end of the day and when we're socialising. But other than that, it's a sedative. It doesn't make you feel anything that's slightly dulled. And that's what you need to do. You need to, firstly, don't take things for granted. You know, how you feel. If you're a month sober, how you feel now is 10 times better than you'd feel if you were drinking, even if you were in the middle of a drinking spree. Okay, and you just need to keep that with you all the time. What are your thoughts on labels? Being labelled an alcoholic or an addict? I'm not comfortable with them. I've had family members or friends refer to me as an alcoholic, and I guess according to society I am, but after over 3.5 years sober, I don't want that label following me for the rest of my life. Yes, I had a serious problem with alcohol, but I worked hard to overcome it, and I don't appreciate the negative connotation associated with that description. Did I suffer from an alcohol use disorder? Absolutely. Maybe I'm being too sensitive, but I thought this was a topic you could address on one of your lives. Thank you very much, and thank you for all you do. That's a really good question. Few things there. Family members and friends referring to you as an alcoholic is, apart from anything else, extremely rude and none of their business. And secondly, you're 3.5 years sober, so you're not alcoholic. You haven't got an alcohol use disorder. You had a problem and you've solved it. You know, if someone smokes and they quit smoking, they're a non-smoker. That's it. You don't have a problem with alcohol because you've quit. It really is that simple. Drinking is drug addiction, and if you quit the drug, you've solved the problem. The term alcoholic isn't a particularly... I mean, I use it a lot in my book, to be honest, but that's because I wrote it 5 years ago or so, and things have changed now anyway. The reason people don't like the term alcoholic is because it's putting the emphasis on the individual. So it's the person that's the problem. Which of course it is, and it's an addictive drug, and that is such a simple concept, but it's so difficult to people to get to grips with, and people try now and say it's genetics or it's spirit. I mean, AA started off by saying it's spiritual. Nothing wrong with alcohol, fine for everyone, but if you've got some kind of spiritual deficiency, you're warped in some way and you get addicted to alcohol, that's gone out the window, of course. But people just can't get to grips with the concept that the drug of choice, the drug that they all enjoy, is actually an unpleasant addictive drug. So they're constantly pointing the blame elsewhere. So, oh, it can't be spiritual, genetics then, or trauma. So they're kind of plucking at straws, desperately trying to divert blame away from where it needs to be laid, which is with the drug itself. The trauma thing's extraordinary. That seems to have got a massive hold on people now. And to a degree I can understand it, because I think a lot of the proponents of that theory say you suffer from some kind of trauma and that's why you reach for the drug in the first place. And if you're talking about, for example, injecting heroin, then I can kind of see the point there, because injecting heroin is a massive step for most people, and it kind of suggests that there's something wrong anyway somewhere, which is why they're trying to do it in the first place. But alcohol's on the other end of the scale. Alcohol isn't a massive step to do it, it's a massive step not to do it. You know, if you go out for an evening and you're not going to drink, you better have your excuses ready, because you will be grilled about why you're not drinking. So to suggest that people pick up alcohol because they've got some kind of underlying trauma is ridiculous. Someone posted in the group the other day something along these lines, and someone responded to it and said, well, I haven't got any trauma, and I've had problems with alcohol. And he responded to that by saying, everyone has trauma. It's humans not having acclimatized or whatever to modern living. Which I think, well, firstly, if you're saying that everyone has trauma, why isn't everyone addicted to alcohol then? And secondly, I think it's just massively insulting to people who do have trauma. Because it's like saying, okay, you were abused as a child, you've been raped, you're struggling with the concept of central heating. Or it's strange for you to sit in an office all day drinking tea instead of going out foraging for nuts and berries. It's massively insulting to people who have suffered real trauma to suggest that not acclimatising to modern living is a source of trauma for people. It's ridiculous. Now I've completely forgotten what I was talking about. Oh yeah, the labels of alcoholic. Yeah, so yes, you shouldn't be labelled as anything you don't want to be labelled with. As far as I'm concerned, you've stopped drinking, you've solved your problem. There's no, were you alcoholic or had alcohol use disorder? Well, in the same way that a smoker was addicted to nicotine, they quit smoking and they no longer take the drug, problem solved. And as I say, it's extraordinarily ill-mannered for people to be referring to you as an alcoholic anyway. Morning, William. Not sure if you'll have an answer for this, but there have been a couple of posts about tinnitus ringing in the ears from people who have quit. Either tinnitus appearing just after quitting or getting worse after quitting. Is there any science to explain this, or is it just that alcohol was likely masking symptoms previously? Some of us are smokers, but not all who have mentioned this. I haven't got a clue. No idea. I did a quick Google thing, and the only thing I found that was remotely on point was tinnitus can sometimes start when you're anxious or stressed. So obviously if you're a regular drinker and you quit, you're going to go through a withdrawal period. So you do mention that people who have quit, so I don't know the timescales, if you're talking about months after they've quit, in which case this probably isn't it, but if you're talking about a few days afterwards, it could well be that. It could be exacerbated by stress, which obviously anxiety and stress is alcohol withdrawal. Good morning, William. I'm 6 months sober on the 26th of April. Wow, well done. 3 more days. My question is to you and other members, at what point do you stop feeling so angry towards the powers that be, the government? I look back at my life and I know no one forced me to drink, but God, it was made easy. The drinks industry have murdered so many people, ruined so many relationships, stolen childhoods, making this vile fudging poison cheaper than a pint of milk at times should be made illegal, surely. So, yes, I kind of take your point. I am a bit philosophical with things in that there's a lot of stuff out there in the world that is deeply unpleasant and ought to be banned or stopped or whatever it is, and it isn't. Alcohol's one of many things. There's smoking, there's other drugs, there's all kinds of horrible abuse and stuff going out there. So I think you can't really do much about it. I don't, and I might be completely wrong in this, I don't see a massive conspiracy between the government and drinks industry. Most people see alcohol as something healthy, fun, sociable, and if you drink too much of it, you get a hangover, and a few poor, benighted freaks can get addicted to it. It's completely wrong, but that's how people see it, and I think the government sees it that way and the drinks industry sees it that way. I don't think they're deliberately peddling something they know to be this, and this is one of the reasons for trying to change people's views on it and to force the reality down their throat. But yeah, it is annoying, and this is the problem with it. We're all but forced to drink, and like as I said before, if you want to go through the next few years of your life not drinking, you'll need to explain it to people. And again, people, why aren't you drinking? Well, it's none of your business why I'm not drinking, but you do have to explain to people I'm not drinking, and you have to make your excuses for not drinking. So I don't think it's just the government and the drinks industry. I think every drinker out there has to take their fair share of blame for that, because we all do it, and I know I've done it myself when someone's turned up and I've been drinking and offered them a drink. That just seems to be the way it is, unfortunately. So the next one is interesting. Could you talk about the Kindling effect and why it happens? It's a new concept to me, and there are posts of people struggling more through subsequent detoxes. So what Kindling is, it's where if you stop drinking completely in detox and then start drinking again and go through it again and again, the withdrawal gets worse and worse and worse. And to be honest, I don't know a massive amount about it. I mean, I was always a binge drinker, so I was constantly doing this, and I didn't find things get particularly worse. I think one of the reasons might be if you're drinking regularly, you're kind of just always at that level, so your brain's always on a certain level of overstimulation to counter the sedating effects of the alcohol. But if you're constantly stopping and going right out the other side and then drinking again, you're kind of making it worse. And I did find something, regular binge drinking in the long term is thought to be more likely to result in brain damage than chronic daily drinking. The reason that chronic sustained alcoholism is thought by some researchers to be less brain damaging than binge drinking is because tolerance develops to the effects of alcohol, and unlike binge drinking, repeated periods of acute withdrawal does not occur. So I think it is as simple as that. If you've got a constant drip of alcohol going into you, your body just acclimatizes to that. But when you're constantly coming out the other end, you're going through the full withdrawal. I have now stopped drinking alcohol for 9 months and feeling good. However, I'm finding it difficult to overcome the guilt. I feel that my drinking caused my family and my mum in particular. It's not I did anything particularly bad when drinking, but she could not watch as she saw alcohol destroy my life. How do you get over that? Our relationship has always been good, but I still feel guilt about it, even though she can see me doing well now. I've created a new self-identity as a non-drinker. Well, firstly, well done for that, and well done for 9 months. I think you just need to overcome that. I quite often say this to people who have been drinking, and you say that you haven't done anything specific. Well, some people have. But the fact of the matter is, like I said before, we're all but forced to drink alcohol because we grow up, our friends are drinking, we go to parties where there's people drinking, we turn on the TV and there's people drinking, we read books and there's people drinking, we put on music and there's songs about people drinking. We're surrounded by people who are drinking, and surprise, surprise, we start drinking, and we drink regularly because that's what we're encouraged to do, and eventually we become addicted to it. So don't feel guilty because it's not your fault. You've done what millions and hundreds of millions of people have done before you. They've taken a drug, not realising what it was, and then got addicted to it. It really is that simple. And you've stopped. And this is the other thing I say about it. The only thing you need do to make amends is to stop. So you stop, you've been 9 months, and that's fantastic. So you say, she can see me doing well now. So she must be extraordinarily proud of you, and you should be proud of yourself. So don't beat yourself up over it. You were doing something that was destructive. You took a huge step and you've solved that problem. And let's be honest, most people can't solve that problem. Okay, most people will just continue drinking, telling themselves it's not a problem. And this is true for every drinker out there, not just people who think they've got a problem or are drinking a lot. Everyone who drinks alcohol, it's Friday night. The whole, what was it, like 87% of the country drinks? Think of all the people out there now in the US, in the UK, in Australia, all over the world drinking tonight. And some of them will just be having 1 or 2 because it's nice. They'll be waking up at 3 in the morning and they'll be lying there feeling a bit stressed and a bit anxious and be worrying about things. Their heart will be increased. They'll wake up tomorrow feeling tired and lethargic. That's the world over. But most people, they know something's wrong, but they also are addicted to it, be it psychologically or physically, and they don't want to stop doing it. So if you have quit drinking, you're way ahead of the curve. You're way better than, you show more courage and fortitude and imagination than any of those other people. So be proud of what you've achieved, and don't worry about it. You've acted in a perfectly rational and sensible way, but you've then actually shown a lot of grit and determination by solving your problem. Here's a question. How do some people have 1 or 2 drinks and just stop? And what on earth is the point? What on earth is the point? So some people have 1 or 2 drinks and just stop. Think about when people start smoking, okay? No one picks up a cigarette and smokes it and is immediately smoking 60 cigarettes a day, okay? It takes time to become addicted, okay? how quickly you become addicted to a drug is directly related to how quickly it hits your bloodstream, okay? Because when you feel the effects of a drug when it's in your bloodstream, and the quicker it goes into your bloodstream, the quicker your subconscious will associate the action that puts the drug in your bloodstream with the effect. Okay, so in terms of getting a drug into your bloodstream, there's 4 ways of consuming a drug. Okay, the quickest way of putting it into your bloodstream is to get a syringe and inject it into your vein. Okay, so the drug is directly into your bloodstream. The second and third quickest ways are about the same. It takes about a second, and that's either snorting, because the drug goes up your nose, and in your sinuses there's membranes where the drug's absorbed straight into the bloodstream, or breathing into your lungs, like smoking. So the drug goes as smoke or vapour into your lungs, and from the lungs it's transported directly to the bloodstream. Okay, so they take about a second or 2 for the drug to hit your bloodstream. The fourth way is to drink it. Now, when you drink it, it goes in your mouth, into your stomach, and I can't remember the exact mechanics, but it has to go into your small intestine or something for it to be absorbed into your bloodstream. So it can take anything up to 20 minutes. So for that reason, alcohol takes far longer to get addicted to than any other drug. So every drug has a take it or leave it stage. The take it or leave it stage for alcohol is far, far longer than any other drug, purely because we drink it instead of smoking it or snorting it or inhaling it. So people who have 1 or 2 drinks and just stop don't really enjoy it. They're kind of suckered into it. These are the people who, you know, they put on the telly and they see people drinking and they see their friends drinking and they see all these people and you know, they've no reason not to drink. It's not against their religion or anything, so they dabble in it, but they don't really enjoy it. That's the point. And the simple fact of the matter is, if you enjoy something, why would you want 1 or 2 of it, or just once a week? Or, you know, if something's enjoyable, don't you want it all the time? The reason they have 1 or 2 is mainly because they just don't particularly enjoy it. And the reason they can have 1 or 2 and just stop is because they haven't yet gone through the full learning process. Because every time that 1 or 2 drinks wears off, it leaves an unpleasant feeling, a corresponding feeling of anxiety. Okay, now for most people, who've just had 1 or 2, they will have their 1 or 2, they'll feel slightly dulled, it will wear off, leaving them feeling slightly anxious, but they probably won't even be aware of it. And even if they were aware of it, it would never dawn on them in a million years to take another drink to get rid of it. Okay, but when you drink at higher levels, as one drink wears off and you have another one, your brain starts to realise that, oh, there's an unpleasant feeling that kicks in at some point, and an alcoholic drink gets rid of that. So over time, you start to associate the wearing off of one drink with wanting another one, and that's what people say, I don't have an off switch. That's all it means. It means that they've learned on a conscious and unconscious level that when one alcoholic drink wears off, it leaves an unpleasant feeling that needs another drink to then relieve it. So people who have 1 or 2 drinks are just people who, like the smoker who's just started smoking and has 1 or 2 when they go out drinking and not for the whole rest of the week. They just haven't got fully addicted to it yet. I have a question. Why is denial so powerful with this addiction? How can the addict one day beg for help and beg to be free of their addiction and say they wish they had never taken the first sip, and the next day turn around and say nothing is wrong? Is it shame? It's easier to deny it and avoid it than face the reality and all its implications for their life. How specifically does an addict rationalise their illness to themselves? The mental gymnastics required are hard for me to grasp. And what, if anything, can be done to make them realise they have a problem, even if they are not willing or ready to do anything to change it yet? Because obviously deep down they already know. The reason denial is so powerful is not just with this addiction, with any addiction, because relieving the withdrawal is pleasant, it's enjoyable, that's what keeps dragging us in. Okay, so denial is so powerful because addicts enjoy taking the drugs. Okay, and part of them may hate it, part of them wants to carry on doing it. And that's why so many people are so defensive of their drugs. And that's why when someone asks you why you stopped drinking, someone says, why aren't you drinking tonight? And you say, oh, I've got a problem with alcohol, I can't drink. They love it because they think, oh, that's okay, you're different to me. You know, you're one of these poor idiots who's got something wrong with them. But if you say to them, I quit, I don't like it anymore, I just don't need it, they will then start getting really defensive and start just, oh, go on, have 1 or 2. It's, oh, what's life like without a drink? And the reason for that is they get very defensive. So why how can the addict one day beg for help and beg to be free, and the next say they wish they'd never taken the first step, and the next day turn around and say nothing is wrong? I do deal with this in Alcohol Explained. When you wake up after a binge, the withdrawal is at its worst, so you feel absolutely dreadful and the reality is all there. But after a couple of days, when you start to get back to normal, the misery is gone, but your desire to drink is still there. And as the misery goes down, the desire to drink builds up, so you kind of start to want to go back to it. It's nothing particularly to do with shame. It's just it's like a tug of war. And on the one hand, there's the desire to stop, and on the other hand, there's the desire to keep drinking. Now, the desire to keep drinking is usually constant, but the desire to stop comes and goes. So when you wake up in the morning and you feel awful, that's when it's at its strongest. But come the evening time, when you start to feel a bit better, and that's when the cravings start to kick in. That's when the desire to stop starts to dissipate a bit. So that's it really. It's just the dynamics very much between how you feel when you're withdrawing and when you're not. This is an interesting one. I'm not sure if you've already answered this previously, but I just wondered what drives you to do this work, support for us all, in addition to your other life responsibilities. It may be a very short answer or maybe not, but thank you for what you do, whatever the answer. I don't know. I got sucked into doing this on a Friday night as well, every Friday night. I quite enjoy doing it, to be honest. I think most people have a natural desire to help others, particularly if it's something you've suffered with, and you can see a way out to help people. And also for my situation now, it's 10 to 9 on a Friday night. My alternative to this is to probably be sat somewhere being moaned at and told to do X, Y and Z. So it's actually a chance to sit down and rest for an hour on a Friday night, which is always very pleasant. And of course, when I've got guests on, I get to chat to people as well. Please discuss the decreased fitness as it relates to alcohol-induced heart rate and how it contrasts to exercise. Oh, I think I've covered this off actually, haven't I? To exercise-induced heart rate. So two complete opposites. If you increase your heart rate by physical activity, you get fitter. If you increase your heart rate with no physical activity, which means taking a drug usually, you erode your fitness and become unfit, which is why one of the many wonderful benefits of drinking is crashing heart attacks in your late 40s. And in fact, what I find worse than that, people die in their 50s and 60s, but what we forget is people don't just drop down dead. They have health problems for years. So like when people are drinking and, like people who die of heart attacks aren't fit and strong and healthy and they suddenly drop down dead. They become increasingly weak and feeble over decades before they drop down dead. That's what makes me almost scares me worse, to be honest. It's not the dying in your 60s, but it's the becoming enfeebled and weak from like your 40s onwards. My daughter is 17 and starting to experiment with alcohol. She's been invited to a party and asked if I can buy her a small bottle of vodka. I've suggested a few cans of pre-mixed vodka and Coke, as she will judge how she feels. I don't really want her drinking, but wondered the best way to handle this. Wondered what your views were and how you will address this if your kids want to try. That's a really difficult one. Because, yeah, I think you would want to be saying, don't be so stupid, don't do it. But of course, if you say that, she's probably going to go and drink anyway. So you probably want to, at least have some control. I don't know how I'll handle it, to be honest. I'm not looking forward to it. I will probably explain to them how it is a bit of a con, and how you don't need to drink at a party to have fun. Human beings get endorphins, an endorphin rush when they have sex, when they eat, when they exercise, and when they socialise. Okay, so when you go out and socialise, you get an endorphin rush and it makes you feel good and euphoric. But when you're 17 and going to a party with your friends and people you don't know, you also feel intensely nervous and self-conscious. So the dynamics is you feel very conscious and self-conscious and nervous. The alcohol anaesthetises that nervousness, and when you've anaesthetised that nervousness, the endorphins flow. So you start to feel really good. And I think I will probably try to explain to them is that you don't need alcohol. You will feel a bit nervous when you get there, but just wait, just chat to people, and soon that feeling of nervousness will dissipate, and then the endorphins will start to flow. Will it do any good? Probably not. I've got a clue. I don't envy you, and it is difficult. I think realistically, I think I'd be inclined to do what you're doing, which is offer, I mean, on the basis she's going to go and drink anyway, have the conversation with her, see if you can explain some of the dynamics, and also explain as well how, however it makes you feel, it will wear off, leaving a corresponding feeling of anxiety, and it will ruin your sleep. Because I think if you plant those seeds in her mind, when she wakes up at 3 in the morning, she'll be thinking, oh God, that was the alcohol that did that, with most people don't even associate it. So you might be able to plant a few seeds there, which will blossom, and even if she drinks now, will perhaps make her think things a bit differently. But no, I don't envy you that decision, but I think you're probably doing the right thing, because I think as well, if you say don't drink, she'll probably go and drink anyway. She'll probably drink something, at least if you're giving her something ready mixed, you know roughly what you're giving her and how much of it, and then she'll feel free to bit more able to open up to you. Whereas if you just put a blanket no, she's just going to do it and hide it from you. So yeah, I'd probably have a couple of those conversations with her about, you know, alcohol's a sedative and your brain does this and it's going to ruin your sleep and blah blah blah. And apart from that, yeah, it's very difficult. Do you think the alcohol industry needs to put more warnings on labels similar to cigarette warnings and have more accountability on advertising on TV, glamorising alcohol, etc.? It's really annoying that it probably won't happen, but wish it could. Governments rely too heavily on the tax revenue from alcohol sales. I think it will happen. I genuinely think alcohol is going the way of smoking more and more. And I think we're probably likely to see less advertising and probably more labels. The thing that was kicking off before lockdown, of course, was there was a few instances of people getting really drunk and flights having to be diverted, and I think they were just about warming up to start banning alcohol in airports, or, you know, having limits on alcohol in airports and on flights. But then of course lockdown kicked in and it all kind of got put on the back burner because there weren't any flights. But I definitely think things are moving, and I think it will happen eventually. I've noticed that this Facebook group is full of people saying they are really tempted to drink days, weeks or months after quitting. And yet this group is also full of people the day after having a drink saying they regret it, feel awful and wish they hadn't. What is going on here? Why can't we engage our rational brains in the decision making? It's because our perspectives change, as dealt with earlier. So fading effect bias kicks in and we're still bombarded. Because I think this is one of the problems with alcohol. Alcohol, more than any other drug, we're bombarded daily with images of laughing, happy drinkers. You know, people sitting outside in the sun drinking and all the rest of it. So it's when you stop drinking, you feel massively better, but then you start to take that for granted. You continue to fantasize about alcohol. You're bombarded by these nonsensical images, and eventually your decision tips and you start to want to drink again. What you said there is exactly what you need to do, which is engage your rational brain in the decision making, and don't get suckered into these ridiculous images that we get bombarded with, be it alcohol advertising or friends' social media feeds, or just idiots on WhatsApp groups saying, oh, when are we going to have a drink, and all the rest of it. Just don't let it happen. The last question I'm going to struggle with, I think. I'm currently struggling a bit on boundaries. It's a concept hard for me to grasp. I realised that I was a people pleaser, and it is sometimes mentioned in Quit Lit that people pleasers get caught in addictions. One of the work is therefore to set healthy boundaries with people in general, boundaries with people drinking, etc. Would you have any insight on that and its relevance to addiction recovery? Thank you tremendously as always. Have a great day. I'm not sure. Boundaries. I'm only vaguely aware of the concept of boundaries. I think it's just, you know, like keeping people at arm's length if you need to. I can see if you're a people pleaser, then yeah, you're open to all kinds of... You can't please people. Frankly, people are idiots, the general population, and you cannot please them no matter what you try and do. So I think if you are a people pleaser, you're probably on a hiding to nothing. And I can understand why you get sort of caught up in things a bit. So I don't really feel qualified to be able to say much on that, I'm afraid. It might be worth putting a post in the group. I tend to be, not much I could offer any great insight in. I'm sorry about that. I hope that was good. Sorry about the slight technical hitch, everyone. I don't know what happened there. So I will see you all next week. And thanks for tuning in.